The hall stretched wider than any human eye had ever seen. Its high, arched ceilings were carved from metal that shimmered like liquid silver under soft, glowing lights. Alien banners of every color and shape hung from above, each one a symbol of a species far older and more advanced than humanity. The air vibrated with murmurs in languages humans could barely interpret. It was a gathering of power, of diplomacy, and of judgment, and the humans had been invited as little more than curiosities. Commander Elias Ward stepped forward, his boots making solid, confident sounds against the polished floor. His armor, though far simpler than the sleek, alien suits around him, was a marvel of human design. It bore marks of practicality rather than style, with reinforced plates, modular attachments, and an underlayer designed to adapt to extreme environments. To alien eyes, it looked awkward, almost laughable. But Elias knew the truth. This armor had survived trials no alien suit had ever faced, and every line and dent told a story of human ingenuity and endurance. The hall fell into a low hum of anticipation as Elias entered. He felt the weight of every gaze, the subtle tilt of heads, and the unspoken whispers. Humans were always the underdogs, the species that aliens assumed had nothing to teach them. This was nothing new. He had faced mockery before in negotiations, on battlefields, and in countless simulations. But today, something felt different. Today, the mockery would be sharp, pointed, and public. From her position at the center of the hall, Ambassador Velka, a towering creature with silver-scaled skin and 3 eyes that shimmered like polished gemstones, leaned forward. She had long observed humanity, her judgments as cold and precise as her species, mathematics. Her voice carried effortlessly over the crowd when she spoke, and her words cut sharply. "What is this?" she said, motioning to Elias with a clawed hand. "A human, and in that costume. Do you call this armor? It looks like something from a primitive museum." Humans in the hall stiffened. Elias' team behind him, all veterans of interstellar service, clenched their fists beneath their gloves. But Elias did not move, did not flinch, and did not speak. He simply stood, the hall reflecting off his polished armor, waiting. Velka's smile widened. She had expected this reaction, the nervous shifting of humans who had been taught since childhood that they were weak, insignificant, unworthy. She expected her words to land, to cut through pride and confidence. But the human before her did not respond the way the others did. Elias' calm was a statement in itself, a quiet defiance that no alien had anticipated. The crowd's laughter lingered, but it faltered. Whispers began to spread. Elias could feel the room's attention tightening around him, almost like gravity. Every species in the hall was measuring, judging, evaluating. They were looking for weakness, for cracks in the human armor, for hesitation. They would find none. A small, nervous murmur arose from a group of humans near the back. "Do you think he'll?" one whispered. Another shushed them quickly, but the tension in their bodies spoke louder than any words. This was the kind of moment that defined a species in the eyes of others. It was a test, one that humans had faced countless times, and Elias intended to pass it without giving them the satisfaction of an immediate reaction. Velka leaned forward, the 3 glimmering eyes locked on him. "You call that armor?" she repeated, the mockery now sharper, edged with expectation. "Or is it just a toy? Surely a human in such a suit could not survive the trials we face every day. Surely you are not even aware of what true strength looks like." He simply adjusted the position of his armor slightly, making it clear that he was aware, fully aware of every word and every motion. He had learned long ago that in situations like this, reaction could betray weakness. Silence, however, was a human weapon no alien could understand. The hall's attention shifted subtly. Aliens began to study the human in front of them with renewed curiosity. His posture, the way his boots were planted firmly on the floor, and the way he held himself radiated confidence. It was not a threat, at least not in the obvious sense, but there was an unmistakable power in the quiet command he projected. A murmur of disbelief spread among the older, more experienced species. They had expected the human to quiver, to speak defensively, to prove himself. Yet here he stood, calm, unshaken, entirely unbothered by ridicule that would have shattered lesser beings. Velka's voice rose again, sharper this time, cutting through the whispers. "You claim to be warriors, humans? You hide behind outdated technology and crude constructs. Surely your species has nothing to show for its centuries of survival." Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his head. His eyes scanned the hall, taking in every alien present. There was no fear in them, only awareness. He spoke, but not immediately. First, he allowed the silence to stretch, to settle, and to weigh on the room. Every alien in the hall felt it, the pause, the calculated stillness of a being who had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger. Then he said simply and clearly, "I understand your doubt, I expected it." That small act of recognition, paired with complete composure, began to shift the atmosphere. Velka's smile tightened. She did not like the human's calm. It was an affront, a disruption of the narrative she had carefully constructed. Aliens thrived on predictability, on assumptions. This human defied both. She motioned to her attendants. "Let us see if this human, this specimen of Earth, can perform under scrutiny. Let us test the armor. Let us test the human." The modular plates shifted subtly, revealing nothing yet hinting at hidden functionality. The aliens leaned in, curiosity piqued. He did not rush. He did not panic. The calm precision of his movements made the room lean closer, almost instinctively. The unexpectedness of human patience and deliberate action was something the aliens had not prepared for. From the far end of the hall, whispers rose among the diplomats. "What is he doing? Why doesn't he fight? Why doesn't he respond?" Today, the human advantage was more than armor. It was coordination, strategy, and instinct honed over centuries of survival against impossible odds. The first demonstration began. A small panel on his armor opened, revealing a set of intricate tools and devices. A tiny drone emerged, hovering silently. It moved with precision, scanning the hall in patterns unfamiliar to alien observers. A few of the older species tilted their heads in recognition. Human engineering, unlike theirs, relied on adaptability rather than pre-programmed perfection. The drone shifted and adjusted in real time, responding to the hall's subtle vibrations and even the energy in the room. Velka's three eyes narrowed. She had expected a human to flail, to reveal incompetence. Instead, she was witnessing controlled, precise, intelligent movement. And yet the real revelation had not yet come. The armor's true capabilities were still hidden like the calm before a storm. Elias remained calm. He did not boast, did not explain. Every alien in the room was left to speculate, to try to read the situation through their own frameworks. But humans, he knew, operated outside those frameworks. That was the point. Humans thrived in unpredictability. Aliens calculated, humans adapted. The murmurs grew louder. Observers whispered to each other in languages Elias did not understand. Some speculated that the armor must contain advanced energy weapons. Others guessed that the human had allies hidden nearby. No one suspected the truth. The human himself was a weapon of ingenuity, resilience, and instinct, and the armor was merely a facilitator. Velka's impatience grew. She had underestimated the human, and her pride would not allow her to show it. She raised a clawed hand, demanding attention. "Show us, human. If your species is as capable as you claim, demonstrate it now." Enough games. It was clear to the watching aliens that the human had engineered this suit not for display, but for survival, for endurance, for overcoming conditions that would destroy most species. The room grew quiet again, this time in awe. Humans had entered as a joke, a curiosity, yet now, slowly, carefully, the story was changing. The mockery was fading. The first seed of respect had been planted. Elias remained still. No boast, no glare, no threat, just presence. He had made his statement simply by existing, by being prepared, by showing that human innovation was subtle, effective, and utterly unexpected. Whispers turned to conversations, and conversations into speculation. Who were these humans? What could they really do? The hall, once filled with laughter at the expense of Earth's children, was now charged with tension. For the first time, aliens were unsure of themselves. Elias looked around, his eyes calm, patient, unflinching. The true test had not yet begun, but the first battle had already been won. Humans would no longer be dismissed. The room had noticed. The crowd had felt it. And as the whispers spread like wildfire, Elias knew the real performance was yet to come. This was the first step. The humans would be tested, challenged, mocked, and observed. But Elias, calm and composed, knew one thing above all: humans survived because they adapted. And adaptation, he thought, always wins in the end. The hall had seen many things. It had never seen a human who did not respond to mockery with fear. It had never seen a species that stood silent while being ridiculed, unshaken, confident. And in that silence, in that stillness, Elias Ward had already begun to rewrite what the universe thought it knew about humanity. The hall was tense, filled with anticipation. Every alien present leaned forward slightly, their attention fixed on the human who had dared to enter their world unarmed in spirit, if not in armor. Commander Elias Ward stood at the center, calm and composed, watching as whispers spread like wildfire. The laughter and mockery from before had faded into uneasy curiosity. Aliens were still skeptical, still expecting failure, but now they were unsure how to predict the human. Ambassador Velka's three eyes glimmered with a mixture of frustration and fascination. She had prided herself on her ability to read other species. She had assumed humanity was weak, relying on primitive armor and brute instinct. Yet here was a human who had stood silently under ridicule, acknowledging her challenge without a single word of protest. That quiet confidence unnerved her. Velka raised a clawed hand, signaling for the first demonstration to begin. "Let us see if the human can perform," she said. Her voice echoed through the hall, commanding attention. "If your species is truly capable, show us what you can do." "Not with words, with action." Aliens murmured among themselves. Many assumed this was some kind of weapon. Others guessed it was a surveillance device meant to gather information. They did not yet understand the true purpose. The drone was a tool of human adaptability, a reflection of a species that thrived not on brute strength alone, but on intelligence, improvisation, and teamwork. The first task began. Velka motioned to a series of obstacles the aliens had prepared. Panels that simulated hazardous terrain rose from the floor. Small devices emitted bursts of energy meant to disrupt movement. Other species had attempted the course before, relying on speed, strength, and pre-programmed routines. They had failed spectacularly. Elias studied the course calmly. He did not rush. He did not panic. He observed every detail, the angles, the timing, the energy patterns. Then, with a controlled step, he moved forward. The armor shifted smoothly with each motion, adapting to the changing terrain. The drone followed his movements, scanning the environment and relaying information to him almost instantaneously. Aliens leaned closer, intrigued despite themselves. The human moved differently from any species they had seen. Not faster, not stronger, but smarter. Every step was deliberate, every maneuver calculated, yet fluid. When a panel shifted to block his path, he did not fight it. He adapted. He used the movement of the panel to propel himself over an obstacle, landing with perfect balance. The hall murmured in disbelief. Velka's eyes narrowed. She had expected the human to fail quickly, to stumble, to reveal the weakness she was certain existed. Instead, he moved with precision, using the environment as an extension of his own body. His armor, once dismissed as clunky and outdated, proved to be more than just protection. It was a tool of adaptability, designed to enhance the human's natural abilities rather than replace them. The obstacles grew more complex. Energy fields attempted to slow his progress. Mechanical arms swung unpredictably. Some aliens even tried to intervene subtly, testing his reactions. But Elias was prepared. His team, stationed discreetly in observation booths, coordinated with him through silent signals. They had trained for every possible scenario. But more importantly, Elias had trained for the unexpected, the unpredictable, chaotic situations that no alien machine could anticipate. At one point, an energy field shifted suddenly, more quickly than predicted. Aliens gasped, expecting failure. But Elias adapted instantly. He used the energy pulse to launch himself over the next obstacle, landing gracefully despite the force. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted into whispers and murmurs. Some leaned forward in disbelief. Others stepped back, unsure if they were witnessing luck or skill. Velka's face was unreadable. She had not expected human ingenuity to manifest so clearly. The others around her were beginning to notice the pattern. Humans did not rely solely on technology or strength. They relied on adaptability, on intelligence, on the ability to turn any situation into an advantage. And this human, in particular, embodied all of those qualities perfectly. Elias reached the final stage of the course. A complex array of moving platforms, shifting energy barriers, and simulated hazards awaited him. Other species had attempted this section, only to be thrown off balance, injured, or forced to retreat. He paused for a moment, assessing every angle, every potential movement. The aliens held their breath, certain this was where the human would fail. Then, without hesitation, he moved. His steps were deliberate yet fluid. He adjusted to each platform as it shifted, timed his movements with precision, and avoided every hazard with uncanny skill. The drone assisted silently, providing real-time data, but the real skill was in the human's instincts, honed over years of survival and training. When he reached the end, the hall erupted, not with laughter but with stunned silence. Aliens could not comprehend what they had just seen. A human had completed a challenge designed to defeat the best of their species, using nothing but intelligence, adaptability, and sheer determination. Velka's three eyes glimmered with something between surprise and annoyance. She had expected this to be easy. She had expected ridicule to be met with failure. Yet here stood a human, unarmored in spirit, victorious without force. The realization began to spread among the crowd. Humans were not to be underestimated. Elias did not boast. He did not raise his voice. He simply stepped back, allowing the hall to process what had happened. His calm presence, combined with his flawless performance, spoke louder than any words ever could. The aliens were forced to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. From the back of the hall, whispers turned to quiet conversations. Observers debated what they had just witnessed. Some speculated that the human had assistance hidden within the armor. Others wondered if it was a trick, a pre-programmed system. But no one could explain the instinct, the fluidity, the intelligence displayed. Humans, it seemed, had abilities that could not be measured by alien standards. Velka motioned for the next stage of the test. "If you are truly capable," she said, her voice tight with barely concealed irritation, "show us how you handle unpredictable opponents." Each was equipped with advanced weaponry and armor, far more sophisticated than anything humans typically used. They surrounded Elias, forming a tight perimeter. The expectation was clear. He would falter, he would panic, he would be overwhelmed. But Elias remained calm. He assessed the situation quickly, noting the strengths, weaknesses, and potential strategies of each alien opponent. Then he acted not with aggression, but with strategy. He used the armor's adaptive systems to enhance his movements, dodging attacks, redirecting energy pulses, and creating openings. Each maneuver was deliberate, designed to turn the aliens' own tactics against them. The hall watched in disbelief. A human, they realized, did not need superior technology to dominate. The human mind, combined with adaptability and resilience, was enough to challenge even the most advanced opponents. And Elias was proof. In the midst of the chaos, the crowd began to murmur with a new emotion: respect. Humans were still a minority, still underestimated, but now it was clear that they possessed qualities that could not be measured by brute strength alone. Elias' performance had demonstrated something far more valuable: intelligence, adaptability, and courage under pressure. Velka's expression was unreadable, but her pride had been bruised. She had assumed that humans were weak, that their armor was a joke, and that their species would fail under pressure. Yet here they were, proving her assumptions wrong, demonstrating qualities she could not anticipate or control. Elias stepped back, allowing the alien combatants to disengage. He did not celebrate, did not gloat. The performance had been enough. The point had been made. Humans were not to be mocked. Humans were not to be dismissed. They were forced to be acknowledged, respected, and if necessary, feared. The hall remained silent for a moment, the impact of Elias' demonstration settling over everyone present. Then, slowly, the murmurs began again, but this time tinged with awe. Aliens who had come expecting to witness weakness now found themselves reconsidering everything they thought they knew about humanity. Elias looked around the hall once more. His calm presence, his deliberate actions, and his unwavering confidence had shifted the atmosphere. The humans present felt pride swell in their chests, while aliens felt a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and caution. The stage had been set for what was to come, and the first step in changing perceptions had been completed. He had not yet revealed everything. The armor, the drones, the adaptability, these were only hints. The true capabilities of humanity were still hidden, waiting for the moment when the hall would be utterly silent, when disbelief would turn to respect, and when the full measure of human ingenuity would be revealed. For now, Elias stood quietly, letting the murmurs spread, letting the hall absorb the reality that humans were not what they expected. The mockery had been silenced, not with words, but with action. And in the minds of every alien present, a new understanding was beginning to take root. Humans were not to be underestimated. The hall had grown quieter than it had ever been before. Aliens of every shape and size whispered among themselves, their voices cautious, uncertain. Commander Elias Ward stood in the center, his armor still intact, yet the performance he had just completed had left everyone questioning what they thought they knew about humans. The mockery from earlier had faded into stunned silence, but the real moment, the moment that would truly shift perceptions, was yet to come. Velka's three eyes, sharp and calculating, focused on him. She had expected him to rely entirely on the armor, on tools and devices, on tricks and machinery. She had not anticipated what she was now beginning to suspect, that the human himself was the most dangerous part of this display. That calm, collected figure, standing motionless in the center of the hall, radiated a presence that no alien technology could match. Without a word, Elias moved his hands to the clasps of his armor. Every eye in the hall followed him, anticipation and disbelief mixing in the air like electricity. He began to release the armor in stages, slowly, deliberately, with a precision that suggested both confidence and control. The movement was silent but commanding, a demonstration of trust in his own body and instincts rather than the crutch of machinery. The first panels slid aside. The aliens leaned forward, whispering urgently to one another. Some looked skeptical. Others looked confused. The armor had seemed bulky and ineffective to their eyes before, yet as it began to shift and separate, it became clear that there was more to it than any of them had realized. Yet even this was not the full revelation. Elias' hands moved to the helmet. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the anticipation grow to an almost unbearable level. The crowd held its collective breath. In that moment, the hall was filled with tension, a living, vibrating force that seemed to hum in Elias' ears as much as in the hearts of the alien spectators. Then, with calm precision, he removed the helmet. His face was revealed, human, unarmored, composed, and entirely unafraid. The hall fell silent in a way it had never experienced before. The three eyes of Velka widened slightly, her body leaning forward instinctively, betraying the astonishment she fought to conceal. Whispers vanished. The room held its breath. Humans, in their natural state, were unpredictable. They were resilient, adaptable, and clever in ways that other species could not fully comprehend. Aliens often measured capability in terms of technological sophistication, armor, and raw energy output. But Elias had just shown them that humans themselves were the instrument of adaptation. The armor was not the power. It was the enhancement, the facilitator. The real strength was the being beneath it. He stood, unarmored in spirit, confident and unthreatened. Scars lined his arms, subtle and unassuming, hints of previous struggles and survival. A cybernetic implant glimmered slightly at his wrist, but it was small, minimal, nothing compared to the alien technology surrounding him. Yet the presence he radiated was far more potent than anything mechanical could provide. The hall was silent because it was forced to reckon with a reality it had never faced. Humans were dangerous in ways that could not be quantified. Velka opened her mouth to speak, to challenge, to dismiss, but no words came. Her pride, carefully built over centuries of diplomacy and assumed superiority, faltered. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that she had misjudged a species. Humans were not simply strong or intelligent. They were cunning, adaptable, and unyielding. They were not afraid of judgment, and they thrived in the face of doubt. Elias' movements were deliberate. He removed additional panels of his armor, revealing the inner layers that had allowed him to move with such efficiency and precision. Reinforcements for joints, systems for regulating temperature, adaptive mechanisms for mobility. All of it was there, but subtle, unobtrusive. It was clear that these systems had been designed not for show, but for practical survival. The aliens murmured quietly, unable to hide their growing respect. He stepped forward, allowing the hall to take in every detail. His stride was calm, purposeful, and measured. He did not rush. He did not show off. Every motion was calculated to convey one truth: humans did not need to rely solely on technology. They adapted, they endured, and they thrived because they were living, thinking, resilient beings. Velka finally found her voice, though it was tight with surprise. You rely on yourself, not the armor?" she asked, her words almost a question to herself rather than to him. Elias nodded slightly, a calm acknowledgement of her observation. He did not boast. He did not need to. The quiet power of his presence, combined with the flawless performance he had just delivered, spoke louder than any declaration. Aliens began to murmur among themselves again, but this time the tone was different. It was no longer mocking. It was speculation, curiosity, and awe. How could a species that appeared so unassuming hold such control over their abilities? How could humans survive where others might fail? Questions raced through the minds of every observer. Elias moved among the hall slowly, deliberately, showing the flexibility and capability of his body, the subtle strength of a species trained for survival in harsh and unpredictable environments. He demonstrated small movements that highlighted balance, dexterity, and control, all without the armor. Every step reinforced a single truth. The human body, when trained and adapted, was a weapon far more sophisticated than any alien had realized. He reached the center of the hall and stopped, letting the room absorb the full revelation. The murmurs had grown louder, but they were now tinged with caution. Aliens who had once laughed at humans now leaned forward, studying every motion, every detail, trying to understand what they had underestimated. Humans were not simply another species to dismiss. They were a challenge, a puzzle, and potentially a threat. Velka's 3 eyes were wide, glimmering with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. She had underestimated this human, and by extension, all of humanity. Her calculated assumptions, the judgments she had made based on superficial appearances, had failed. The mockery she had intended to wield as a weapon had collapsed under the weight of human ingenuity and composure. Ilya's calm demeanor reinforced the lesson further. He did not taunt. He did not demand respect. He simply existed as a living example of humanity's underestimated power. Each alien present began to understand something fundamental. Strength was not always measured in energy output or advanced technology. Sometimes it was measured in resilience, intelligence, adaptability, and the quiet confidence to face doubt without flinching. A human scientist in the observation booth whispered to a colleague, "He's showing them what we really are, not just our tools, but ourselves. And we thrive when others underestimate us." Then Elias made a small gesture, removing the final pieces of his armor that concealed subtle reinforcements and adaptive systems. The aliens gasped, not in fear but in astonishment. Even now, what remained was functional and powerful, yet it was clear that the armor had been secondary to the human himself. The true strength was in adaptability, in resilience, and in intelligence. Velka finally stepped back, a small acknowledgement of defeat in her posture. She had expected to dominate, to humiliate, and to remind humanity of its place. Instead, she had been forced to witness a species that operated beyond her understanding. The hall had shifted, and with it, the perception of humans had changed irrevocably. Elias did not speak. He did not need to. The demonstration, the removal of the armor, and the calm confidence he exuded conveyed a single undeniable truth. Humans were not to be mocked, dismissed, or underestimated. Observers across the hall whispered among themselves, debating what they had just witnessed. Some alien species were visibly shaken, adjusting their postures and expressions as they processed the reality of human capability. Others were curious, studying Elias and considering the implications of a species that could survive, adapt, and thrive in ways that defied expectation. Elias allowed the moment to linger, letting the hall absorb the full meaning of what they had seen. The silence, the awe, the quiet tension, it was all part of the lesson. Humans had proven that they were more than appearances, more than tools, more than predictable patterns. They were living, adaptable, unpredictable, and entirely capable of surpassing expectations. Finally, he stepped back, signaling that the demonstration was complete. The hall remained silent, the impact settling over every observer. The whispers grew quieter, more thoughtful. Respect had replaced mockery. Curiosity had replaced disdain. And in the center of it all, Elias Ward stood as a living testament to the underestimated power of humanity. He had not used weapons. He had not relied solely on technology. He had relied on himself, on training, on adaptability, and on human ingenuity. And in doing so, he had silenced a hall full of beings who had come to mock him, leaving only one undeniable truth. Humanity, underestimated as ever, had just proven its worth. The hall remained silent, heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. Every alien present, from towering 6-limbed diplomats to small, hovering emissaries, stared at Commander Elias Ward with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The human had removed the armor, revealing himself as the true instrument of strength and ingenuity. What had begun as mockery now hung in the air as stunned curiosity, and some even felt the first hints of respect. Elias took a slow step forward. He did not rush, did not demand attention. His calm movements, deliberate and controlled, drew the hall's eyes naturally to him. Each step was a statement of confidence, a demonstration of human composure, and an assertion that he did not need armor, weapons, or machines to prove his worth. The audience had been waiting for a show of power, yet they were witnessing something far more profound, the quiet authority of humanity itself. Aliens shifted in their seats. Whispers started to rise again, careful, hushed, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile tension. "He is alone," one diplomat whispered, "and yet he is not afraid." Another muttered, "I underestimated them. I thought they were weak, but they are different." The human in front of her had proven that strength was not always measured by machines or energy output, but by intelligence, instinct, and calm determination. Elias' gaze swept across the room. He could see the subtle changes in posture, the quick glances exchanged between alien observers, and the slight lowering of energy shields as some realized they might have misjudged the situation. He understood the power of presence, and he wielded it without aggression. This was not about intimidation. It was about revelation, showing a species that humans were capable of far more than appearances suggested. Slowly, he raised his hand slightly in acknowledgement, not in a gesture of threat, but in a gesture of understanding. He did not speak yet. Words were unnecessary at this moment. His actions had already spoken volumes. He had proven himself in movement, in adaptability, in resilience, and in courage. Every observer knew it. Every whisper now carried the weight of reconsideration. A younger alien diplomat, one who had not yet seen the full extent of the demonstration, leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "They are remarkable. I did not expect it." "I thought humans were primitive. I was wrong." The other nodded, eyes wide, as if finally seeing a species they had only underestimated before. Elias finally spoke, his voice calm and steady, carrying clearly to every corner of the hall. "We do not hide behind machines," he said simply. "We make them work with us. We adapt. We endure. We overcome." The words were not loud or aggressive, but they resonated with authority. Every alien who heard them understood that they were not just statements. They were principles, the essence of human strength. The room was silent again, this time not in disbelief, but in reflection. The aliens were considering what had been said, what had been demonstrated, and what it meant for their assumptions about humanity. Humans had survived the challenge not by overwhelming force, not by advanced energy weapons, but by intelligence, adaptability, and calm confidence. It was a lesson that could not be ignored. Velka's expression was difficult to read. She had expected humiliation, mockery, and failure. Instead, she had witnessed a demonstration of human resilience and ingenuity that left her uneasy. She could not claim victory. She could not even pretend that the human before her was ordinary. She had misjudged not just this individual, but an entire species. Elias walked slowly through the hall, each step deliberate, each motion a quiet display of human poise and control. The aliens parted slightly, some instinctively, some respectfully, recognizing the authority in his presence. He did not rush, did not demand recognition. He simply moved, allowing the hall to witness the composure and capability of a human in full control of his body and mind. Every movement highlighted something profound. When he shifted weight to avoid a slight obstruction, it demonstrated balance and dexterity. When he extended an arm to adjust his movement around a small energy field, it showcased adaptability. When he paused to assess the layout of the room before proceeding, it revealed foresight and intelligence. Each subtle action communicated a truth that no alien machine could replicate. Humans were unpredictable, intelligent, and capable of adjusting instantly to circumstances. The murmurs among the observers grew, but the tone had changed. Where there had once been mockery and doubt, now there was awe and consideration. Aliens who had once laughed at the armor, at the supposed weakness of humans, now leaned forward, studying every motion, trying to understand the true nature of the species before them. Velka took a deep breath, her pride forcing her to regain composure. "You are different than I expected," she said carefully, her voice measured. "I assumed your species relied entirely on technology and crude constructs. Yet here you stand, unarmed in spirit, confident in your own capabilities. I underestimated you." They had proven it through action, presence, and intelligence. The armor had been secondary, the true strength had always been in the human himself. Observers continued to whisper, sharing observations, speculating on what else humanity might be capable of. Some were cautious, realizing that their assumptions had been flawed. Others were curious, eager to learn more about this species that had been dismissed for so long, yet had demonstrated such remarkable abilities. Elias continued to move through the hall, maintaining his calm and measured presence. He allowed the observers to process the revelation fully, to understand that humans were not a species to dismiss lightly. Every step, every motion, every subtle display of strength reinforced the lesson he had been demonstrating. Humans adapt. Humans endure. Humans thrive where others fail. A group of young humans in the hall, watching their commander, felt a surge of pride and inspiration. They had witnessed a lesson in composure, intelligence, and courage. Elias' actions were not just a demonstration for the aliens. They were a statement to humanity itself. That strength did not always come from technology, but from within, from resilience, and from the ability to face doubt without fear. Velka's eyes followed him closely, analyzing every subtle movement. She realized that the human had accomplished something extraordinary. He had not needed to fight, had not needed to boast, and had not relied solely on armor or weapons. His presence, intelligence, and adaptability had communicated more powerfully than any machine or energy output ever could. Elias reached the center of the hall once more and paused. The audience, now fully attentive, waited for his final statement. This was the moment that would define the impression of humanity in this assembly. The silence was deep, filled with anticipation, as the hall collectively leaned in to hear the humans speak. "We do not seek to dominate with force alone," he said, his voice calm, steady, and clear. "We rely on understanding, on intelligence, and on our ability to adapt. That is how we survive. That is how we thrive, and that is why you should never underestimate humanity." The demonstration, combined with the calm authority of his presence, had shifted the perception of an entire species. Velka finally straightened, the tension in her posture easing slightly. She had learned a valuable lesson in humility and perception. Humans were not the species she had assumed. They were far more capable, far more unpredictable, and far more resilient. Her pride had been challenged, and she had no choice but to acknowledge it. Elias allowed the moment to settle, letting the hall absorb the full impact of his presence, his words, and his demonstration. The humans present felt pride swell in their chests, inspired by the confidence and composure of their leader. The aliens were left with a new understanding, a realization that humans were not to be underestimated, that their strength lay in adaptability, intelligence, and resilience rather than brute force alone. As he moved to step back, the hall erupted into whispers of admiration and quiet respect. The mood had shifted completely from mockery to cautious acknowledgement. Humans were no longer merely tolerated. They were recognized, studied, and perhaps even feared in the sense that respect often brings. Elias glanced once more at Velka, who met his gaze steadily, though her expression carried the weight of reluctant respect. She had underestimated humanity, and the lesson had been delivered without aggression, without threat, and without humiliation. The silence in the hall had been replaced by contemplation, a quiet acknowledgement that the human species was far more than appearances suggested. Finally, Elias turned and walked toward the exit, each step measured, deliberate, and calm. His demonstration was complete. The hall had witnessed the full measure of human adaptability and intelligence. The armor once mocked had served its purpose, but the revelation had been clear. Humans themselves were the true instruments of strength. As he left the hall, whispers continued, filled with speculation, admiration, and cautious recognition. Aliens who had come expecting entertainment had instead received a lesson in humility and perception. Humanity, underestimated and dismissed, had just made its presence known in a way that could not be ignored. The hall remained quiet after Commander Elias Ward had walked through it, every step measured and deliberate. Aliens who had come expecting ridicule and easy amusement now found themselves confronted with a species they had underestimated. Humans had proven something far more valuable than brute strength or advanced weapons. They had shown intelligence, adaptability, and calm confidence in the face of doubt. The silence lingered, heavy with realization, as the hall processed the demonstration that would be remembered for centuries. Velka's 3 eyes scanned the room. She noted the change in posture among the diplomats, the subtle nods of recognition, the quiet murmurs of admiration. Her pride had been bruised, yet she could not ignore what had occurred. Humans were not simply surviving, they were thriving where other species might falter. She had underestimated them, and the lesson had been delivered without arrogance, without violence, and without threat. Elias took another slow step forward. He did not rush, did not raise his voice, and did not gesture wildly. Each movement conveyed confidence, each step radiated calm authority. The audience was captivated not by weapons or displays of destructive power, but by the presence of a human who had demonstrated mastery over himself, over his environment, and over expectations. The young humans in the observation booths watched their commander with quiet pride. They had trained for years, preparing for moments just like this. Yet even they were awed by the composure he displayed. It was more than leadership. It was a living example of what humanity could achieve when calm, intelligence, and courage guided every action. Velka finally spoke, her voice steady but measured. "Humans," she said, addressing the assembly as well as Elias directly, "your species is unlike any we have encountered. I underestimated you. I assumed reliance on technology alone defined your strength. I was wrong. Your resilience, adaptability, and intelligence are far greater than appearances suggest." Some nodded subtly. Others leaned forward, curious and respectful. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Humans were no longer seen as minor curiosities. They had earned recognition and, more importantly, the acknowledgement that their potential could not be measured by conventional metrics. Elias inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than triumph. He did not boast. He did not issue threats. The point had already been made. Humanity was capable, intelligent, and resilient. The armor had been a tool, the demonstration had been a lesson, and now the presence of the humans themselves was enough to command attention. He moved toward the center of the hall, walking with calm precision. Every alien observer instinctively took note of his movements, analyzing, calculating, and reassessing their assumptions. Humans had always been underestimated in interstellar diplomacy. Aliens had assumed that appearances defined capability. Elias had just proven that they were wrong. The murmurs grew louder, but this time they carried a different tone. Respect had replaced mockery. Curiosity had replaced derision. Humans, who had once been dismissed, were now recognized as a species to be studied and understood. Their unpredictability, their intelligence, and their adaptability made them formidable in a way that no alien machine or weapon could replicate. Velka studied Elias closely. Her pride had been challenged, but she also felt a measure of admiration. The human before her had demonstrated a principle that her species often overlooked. True strength lay not only in technology, not only in weapons or energy output, but in intelligence, foresight, and the ability to adapt to any situation. She realized that humans could not be dismissed lightly. Elias stopped at the center of the hall and turned to face the assembly. His posture was calm, confident, and unyielding. Every eye was on him, every mind analyzing his movements, his demeanor, and his presence. He spoke, his voice calm, measured, and clear. "We do not seek to dominate with violence alone," he said. "We rely on understanding, on adaptability, and on intelligence. We survive where others falter because we learn, we endure, and we work together. That is the measure of humanity, and that is why we cannot be underestimated." They had relied on themselves, their minds, their instincts, and their ability to adapt in real time. The lesson was undeniable. Velka stepped back, her posture easing slightly. She had expected to dominate this demonstration. She had expected to assert control over a species she had assumed weak. Instead, she had been forced to acknowledge the power of intelligence, strategy, and human adaptability. Her pride was wounded, but she could not deny the reality before her. The young humans in the hall, observing their commander, felt a surge of pride and inspiration. They had seen leadership, composure, and mastery of circumstance demonstrated in real time. Elias had not only shown them the capabilities of one individual but the potential of humanity itself. It was a lesson in confidence, in presence, and in the quiet power of a species underestimated for too long. Observers among the alien species leaned forward, whispering to one another. "They are different," one said. "We cannot judge them by our usual measures." Another nodded. "They adapt. They endure, they think, they survive." The recognition was spreading quickly, a subtle acknowledgement that humans had proven their worth. Elias turned slowly, scanning the hall once more. His presence was a statement in itself, demonstrating calm authority, intelligence, and confidence without the need for weapons or threats. Every alien observer felt the subtle weight of human capability, a force not measured in energy output but in foresight, adaptability, and resilience. The assembly was learning something important. Humans were unpredictable, intelligent, and capable of thriving in situations designed to challenge the best of alien ingenuity. The lesson was clear, and the impact was profound. Velka finally approached Elias cautiously. She stood before him, her pride tempered by recognition. "You have demonstrated something remarkable," she said. "I misjudged your species, as did many of us. Humans are not what we assumed. Your intelligence, your adaptability, your resilience, it is unlike anything we expected. We must reconsider our approach." Aliens began to approach humans, not as inferior or amusing creatures, but as equals worthy of respect. Diplomatic conversations shifted subtly, influenced by the undeniable display of intelligence and capability. Humans were no longer the species to be dismissed. They were now participants to be reckoned with, studied, and respected. Elias took one final step back, allowing the moment to settle. His demonstration had concluded, but its impact would resonate long after the assembly dispersed. Humans had proven themselves not through violence, not through intimidation, and not through showy displays of power. They had proven themselves through presence, intelligence, adaptability, and composure, the qualities that truly defined strength. As he prepared to exit the hall, he glanced briefly at his team, who had watched in quiet pride. Together, they had faced doubt, mockery, and expectation, and together they had shown the universe the true measure of humanity. Their unity, skill, and presence had transformed perception in a single demonstration. Velka observed the humans as they prepared to leave. Her expression softened with respect. She had learned a lesson in humility and recognition. The species she had underestimated was far more capable than she had imagined. The hall, once filled with mockery and doubt, was now charged with consideration, curiosity, and acknowledgement. Humans had earned a place of recognition among the observers, not through destruction, but through intelligence, adaptability, and quiet confidence. As the humans departed the hall, whispers and discussions followed them. Observers debated what they had witnessed, speculated on human capability, and considered the implications of a species that could survive, adapt, and thrive under conditions that had challenged even the most advanced civilizations. The demonstration had changed minds, perceptions, and expectations. Elias paused at the exit and looked back one last time. The hall was no longer a place of mockery, it was a place of acknowledgement. He had shown them that humans were more than their technology, more than their armor, more than appearances. Humans were a species defined by intelligence, adaptability, and resilience, and in that moment, the universe had begun to take notice. The humans left the hall together, their heads held high, their confidence unshaken. They had proven themselves without violence, without arrogance, and without the need for destructive displays. The lesson had been delivered, the perception of humanity forever altered. Aliens who had come expecting mockery had witnessed the quiet power of a species underestimated for too long. Outside the hall, the humans gathered briefly. The young ones, inspired by what they had seen, looked at Elias with admiration and respect. "You showed them," one whispered. "You showed them exactly what humans are capable of." Humans survive because we adapt, because we endure, and because we work together. That is what they needed to see. Her pride had been challenged, her assumptions shattered. She had underestimated a species, and the lesson was unforgettable. She turned to the assembly and spoke quietly, acknowledging what had been proven. "We have learned something today," she said. "Humans are not as we expected. Their strength is not in weapons alone, but in intelligence, adaptability, and the courage to face doubt without fear. We must remember this. They could survive where others might fail, adapt to situations that confounded even the most advanced technology, and thrive in circumstances that tested the limits of endurance." Elias and his team walked away from the hall, unarmored in spirit, yet more powerful than many had assumed. The demonstration was over, but its impact would last far longer than any weapon or energy output could achieve. Humanity had proven itself, and the universe had taken note. In the quiet moments after the assembly, observers whispered to one another, considering what they had witnessed. Humans were no longer merely a minor species to dismiss. They were intelligent, adaptable, resilient, and worthy of recognition. Their presence would change interstellar diplomacy, alliances, and perceptions for years to come. And for Elias Ward and his team, there was a quiet satisfaction. They had faced doubt, mockery, and expectation, and they had emerged victorious. Not through force, not through threat, but through composure, intelligence, adaptability, and the quiet power of humanity itself. The universe would remember this day. Humans had spoken without words, demonstrated without violence, and commanded respect without arrogance. The lesson was clear, and it would not be forgotten. Underestimate humans, and you will pay for it.